There are moments when distance stops being a punishment and becomes a form of self-preservation. A person may reach the edge of a relationship, environment, job, friendship, family pattern, or entire chapter of life and realize that staying close to what is harming them is no longer an act of loyalty. It has become self-deletion. In those moments, the decision to move away may not feel dramatic at first. It may feel quiet, mathematical, almost geometric, a careful measurement of what proximity has cost, what integrity still requires, and how much of the self remains intact when the connection continues demanding more than it gives. The geometry of distance is the emotional calculation that happens when a person begins comparing two realities: the life they are living beside what harms them, and the life that may become possible if they step away. This calculation is rarely simple. Leaving can involve grief, guilt, fear, practical uncertainty, and the ache of abandoning a familiar place, even when that place has become painful. Yet, psychological discussions of toxic relationships often emphasize that repeated harmful patterns can damage self-worth, mental health, and well-being, and that creating distance or ending contact may be necessary for healing and self-protection. Moving away is not always physical. Sometimes it means leaving a conversation, ending a friendship, changing a routine, refusing a role, quitting a workplace, or closing the door on a version of yourself that only knew how to survive by shrinking. At other times, it is physical. Packing boxes, changing cities, crossing state lines, and starting over in a place where the old patterns cannot reach you as easily. Whether the distance is emotional, relational, or geographical, the deeper question is the same. What kind of space does your healing require? Emotional limits often arrive before we have language for them. The body may know first. Your shoulders tighten before a phone call. Your stomach drops when a certain name appears on the screen. You feel exhausted after every interaction, even when nothing obvious happened. These reactions are not weakness. They are information. They may be the nervous system quietly reporting that a connection, place, or pattern has become too costly to keep entering without protection. Intellectualizing emotional limits means stepping back far enough to examine the pattern without drowning in it. It is the moment when a person stops asking only, "Do I still care?" and begins asking, "What does this connection require me to abandon in order to stay?" Care alone is not always enough to justify continued proximity. A person can care deeply and still be harmed. They can love someone and still recognize that the relationship has become unsafe for their peace, identity, or growth. This kind of reasoning is not cold, it is compassionate toward the self. It allows emotion to be honored without allowing emotion to overrule reality. The facts may be simple, even if the feelings are not. You have explained enough, waited enough, forgiven enough, adapted enough, and diminished yourself enough. At some point, the evidence becomes a boundary. Distance becomes the answer, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started including yourself in the circle of care. To reclaim agency is to remember that your life is not merely something that happens to you. Even after pain, disappointment, manipulation, rejection, or loss, there remains a place inside you where choice can return. That choice may not always be immediate. It may begin as a whisper. "I do not want to keep living this way. I do not want to keep becoming smaller. I do not want my peace to depend on someone else's refusal to grow." Agency is often reclaimed in stages. First comes recognition. This is hurting me. Then comes honesty. I have been participating in my own disappearance by staying close to what keeps wounding me. Then comes grief, because even necessary departures can hurt. Finally, there is action, the boundary, the conversation, the packed bag, the blocked number, the job application, the apartment search, the decision to stop returning to the same emotional battlefield. This does not mean every difficult relationship or place must be abandoned. Some connections can heal when both people are accountable, respectful, and willing to change. But when the pattern remains one-sided, when your boundaries are dismissed, when your nervous system never feels safe, and when staying requires continuous self-betrayal, distance may become the most honest form of agency available. It is not escape. It is return. You are returning to the authority of your own life. Distance has a shape. Sometimes it is a narrow hallway where you stand between who you were and who you are becoming. Sometimes it is a bridge you cross with shaking hands, knowing you cannot carry every old attachment to the other side. Sometimes it is a foggy road at dawn, with the past behind you still visible enough to ache, but no longer close enough to command your steps. The image of geometry helps because leaving is rarely a single emotional burst. It is an arrangement of lines, angles, thresholds, and boundaries. There is the line you can no longer let someone cross. There's the angle from which you finally see the pattern clearly. There's the distance between what you hoped would happen and what actually kept happening. There's the threshold where remaining becomes more frightening than beginning again. In that sense, moving away can be imagined as stepping out of a dark room and into a wider landscape. At first, the open space may feel cold. Freedom often does when a person has spent a long time adapting to confinement. But the emptiness is not proof that you made the wrong choice. It may simply be the first space where your own life has room to breathe again. There are several signs that moving away may no longer be avoidance, but wisdom. One sign is repeated harm without meaningful change. Another is the loss of self-recognition. You notice you are quieter, more anxious, less creative, more guarded, or less alive than you used to be. Another is emotional exhaustion that does not lift even after rest. You may also notice that you keep explaining basic respect to someone who benefits from misunderstanding you, or that you're always preparing for the next disappointment rather than living freely in the present. Moving away can also become necessary when the environment itself keeps reactivating the wound. A place can hold memory. A street, a house, a workplace, a town, or even a social circle can become filled with reminders of who you had to be in order to survive there. Relocation and major life transitions can bring stress because they disrupt routine, identity, and familiarity, but they can also create the conditions for reorientation. Starting over somewhere else may feel frightening because the old map no longer works. It may also be freeing for that same reason. Beginning again does not mean pretending the past never happened. It means refusing to let the past remain the only architect of your future. The new place, new routine, or new distance does not magically erase grief, but it can interrupt the cycle that kept grief constantly fed. It can give your nervous system new evidence. Not every room is unsafe. Not every morning begins with dread. Not every relationship requires shrinking. And not every version of you has to keep living under the same shadow. Even when moving away is right, grief may still come with it. You may grieve the version of the relationship that almost existed, the home you tried to build, the person you hoped would change, the city that once felt like possibility, or the old self who believed endurance would eventually be rewarded. That grief does not mean you should go back. It means something mattered. It means you had hopes, attachments, memories, and dreams that deserve to be acknowledged before they are released. Give that grief a respectful place, but do not let it become a compass that points you backward. Missing something is not the same as being meant for it. Nostalgia can soften the edges of pain and make old harm look smaller from a distance. When that happens, return to the facts. Remember what your body felt like there. Remember the conversations you had to keep repeating. Remember the ways you disappeared. Let memory be honest, not romantic. Grief can coexist with conviction. You can cry while packing. You can feel afraid while choosing the healthier path. You can love what you are leaving and still know that staying would cost too much. There's no contradiction in that. It is the complexity of becoming free. Once distance has been chosen, the next task is not simply to leave, but to rebuild. This rebuilding may begin with ordinary things. A new morning routine, a cleaner room, a different route to work, a quiet evening without emotional chaos, a meal eaten in peace, a phone that no longer feels like a threat. These small moments matter because they teach the mind that safety can be ordinary. Peace does not always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it arrives as the absence of dread. As you rebuild, ask yourself practical and emotional questions. What routines help me feel grounded? What environments make me feel more like myself? What relationships leave me peaceful rather than depleted? What values do I want this next chapter to honor? What old roles am I no longer willing to perform? These questions turn distance into direction. They help ensure that leaving is not only an ending, but the beginning of a more intentional life. If you are standing on the threshold of moving forward, starting over, or leaving somewhere that no longer feels like home, please remember this. Fear does not mean you are making the wrong choice. It may simply mean you are stepping beyond the limits of what has been familiar. New beginnings often feel uncertain because they have not yet had time to become safe. But uncertainty is not the same as danger. Sometimes it is the open space where a better life begins to form. You're not weak for needing distance. You're not cruel for choosing peace. You're not selfish for refusing to keep living in a place, pattern, or relationship that requires the slow disappearance of your spirit. Moving forward may ask you to grieve, but it may also give you back the parts of yourself you forgot were still alive. There is life beyond the chasm. There are rooms you have not entered yet, people you have not met, versions of yourself you have not discovered, and mornings that may one day feel lighter than you can currently imagine. The road ahead may not be simple, but it can be yours. And sometimes that is the beginning of everything. One step away from what was breaking you, one step toward the self who is waiting to breathe, heal, and begin again.